What's the point of taking notes? When you're in school, we did it because teachers told us to. They said it would help us remember important pieces of information that we would need to recall during a test or exam. By the end of the school year, we'd have a bunch of notebooks from every subject that most of us would throw away, burn, or keep in some random box, only to be discovered decades later to be questioned why we kept it. Why did I keep these? But with the world's collective knowledge a tap away on a smartphone, there's little need to remember anything at all these days. Are notebooks and note-taking in general an unnecessary activity that we can leave in the past? Or is it a tool that can help us improve our lives in some way? Can it help us achieve our goals? I'd argue that it's one of the most important things that we can do these days, especially if you're looking to achieve things. To understand why, we can look at this example. If you put a person in a desert or a forest with no visible landmarks and tell them to walk in a straight line, something weird happens. They can't. Researchers have run similar experiments where they've taken people, blindfolded them, and told them to walk in a straight line, and they all show the same tendency. Lacking external reference points, all of them eventually start walking in circles. While we aren't exactly sure why this happens, there's one thing that we can take away from this experiment. Humans don't have a built-in sense of direction. This seems to be true when navigating the physical world, but I can't help but think that it also applies to people navigating through life. In his book, Some Days Today, Matthew Dix summarizes it nicely. He says, "I think tragically what most people do in life is they're like water going down a mountain. They follow the path of least resistance. If you don't spend time thinking about yourself, where I am, who I am, where I'm going, where do I actually want to go, we end up in places wondering, how did I even get here? We got here because we didn't think. We didn't make decisions in an active way that moved us through life. We allowed others to move us in directions that perhaps we didn't want to go. This is the reason why I've been taking personal notes over the last few years, even when I don't have a teacher or boss telling me to. Before I started, I always had these big, overarching goals that I wanted to accomplish in my lifetime. But year after year passed, and not only would I not have accomplished any of them, I wouldn't even have made any progress towards them at all. I was walking through life in circles. I was lost and I didn't have direction. It was only until I started carrying around a notebook and systemizing my thoughts into different categories is when I started to achieve anything. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing this process that has helped me so much. A couple years ago, I came across the idea of a commonplace book, and it was really the start of all of this. Commonplace books are a tool that some of the greatest thinkers throughout history have used as a way to compile and organize knowledge. Unlike a journal or diary where people generally write about their daily events, feelings, or emotions, people use commonplace books as a way to collect and organize meaningful quotes, ideas, and observations they come across while reading or during everyday life. The idea here is to continue living your life, but whenever you come across something that resonates with you, something that you think is significant or meaningful, you pause and take the time to write it down. The first benefit to this is that you'll be living life more actively rather than passively. Most people are stuck on autopilot, living their same daily routines. Cycles that repeat over and over without giving it a second thought. This is how weeks, months, and even years can pass without even realizing it. Being more aware and on the lookout for things to add in a commonplace book can help you break from the cycle. The second benefit is that the act of choosing what goes into your commonplace book actually reveals your inner compass. When you encounter a quote, idea, or observation that resonates enough for you to write it down, you're essentially mapping out your intellectual and emotional landscape. It shows you what's currently on your mind or how you're emotionally doing. For example, you might notice that you're repeatedly drawn to ideas about courage, or that you're always saving things you notice about human relationships. These patterns can show you your core values or what your mind has been preoccupied with, even if you weren't consciously aware of it. I think that deep down, we all know the direction we want to go to in life. Even when we feel lost, it's deep in our subconscious. Sometimes we ignore it, but this can be a good way to tapping into it. So how do you start? All you need is a notebook and a pen that you can carry around you every day. You can try this with your phone, but I'd highly recommend going analog for this. There's something about using a physical notebook and writing things down mechanically with a pen that does something to your brain. It forces you to slow down and think about what you're writing. It doesn't matter what kind of notebook you use, but I know I'm gonna get questions about it, so I thought I'd share mine. After going through a lot of notebooks of different brands and sizes, the ones that I've been using for the past year or so are these ones by Field Notes. I really like how thin these are. When they're in your pocket, they conform to the shape of your body, and you don't really feel it at all. The materials and paper are nice, and I like how it wears and looks older over time. I feel like it gives them character. I do like keeping these for my records, just so I know what's been on my mind over the years. For pens, I've been liking this one by Zebra. It's called the Sarasa R. I actually went down the rabbit hole of pens early last year, looking at really premium full metal pens. But after trying them, I decided that I actually prefer cheap plastic pens. They're way lighter, which matters for something that you're going to carry with you every day, and they won't scratch up your phone if you put them in the same pocket. If you're really picky about ink like me, I actually buy 0.5 Energel refills from Pilot, and I put them into these pens. I find that this ink writes smoother and dries faster than the stock ink, and the refills fit in the Sarasa R perfectly. Another nice thing about these is that they have a built-in clip that can clamp onto thin notebooks like field notes. This makes it easy to carry both of these things together. After commonplacing, the next part of this process is to dive deeper into the things that you've captured. What I'm looking for here are patterns or common themes that I can find in the mess of the things that I've collected. The best way to do this, at least for me, is journaling. I feel like I'm a lot more unstructured when it comes to journaling than other people. I don't really use journaling prompts or a list of questions or anything like that. What I like to do instead is go through my Commonplace book, pick an entry, and just start writing. It's a bit hard to describe, but I try not to think about the words that I'm actually writing down. Any thought that crosses my mind just goes straight onto the paper. I don't edit myself. What I'm looking for here is just a stream of consciousness that's going directly from my brain onto the page. For example, one of the earliest quotes that I collected when I first started commonplacing was this one by Lao Tzu. It read, "A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step." When I started expanding on this and writing about it in my own journal, I found myself asking more questions. Like, how amazing is it that every single man-made thing that exists today, no matter how big or complicated, started from a single person taking one single forward action? I started asking myself questions like, what journey am I on right now? Do I want to be on a different one? What would be my first step on that journey? After doing this for a while with different entries, I found that it was really helpful on turning that general compass direction that you get from commonplacing into an actual thing that you want to achieve. For me, I realized that I've always wanted to start my own business, and I never did because I thought it was too big of a thing to do. I thought that I had to quit my job and take multiple years off to do it, but after journaling, I realized that all of that thinking was just a big excuse, and I could just start it as a side hustle in my free time and build it slowly. For you, it might be something completely different. This whole process is a very personal thing, and it's gonna be different for everybody. All I can say is that it helped me be a lot more introspective, and I feel like that's missing for a lot of people. I find that almost everybody is looking for answers on the internet or people's opinions or things like that. That can be a helpful thing, and it definitely has its place, but don't ignore what's inside of you. A lot of the time, trusting your intuition or your gut can help you get you there too. For journaling, I switch between analog and digital. On days that I feel like I want to slow down, I get out my larger journal and use a fountain pen. I know there's a huge community on pens and stationery that goes really deep, but if you're looking for a good place to start, I personally recommend notebooks and journals from Midori. It's a Japanese brand, and you can tell that they really care about their products with the level of detail they put into them. I'm a big fan of the grid or graph layout for writing, and a neat detail that they put into their pages is a dash on every second box and a dot for every 10th. It's a subtle thing, but if you ever try to space boxes out evenly onto a page, it really helps. On some days though, I'll write with either my computer or iPad. I find that sometimes to get into that stream of consciousness, it's useful to be able to write down your thoughts quickly, and I can type a lot faster than I can write. My advice would be to experiment with both and see what works for you. You might find that, like me, it can be useful to switch between digital and analog depending on how you feel. So maybe you want to start a business, or you want to get into shape, or maybe you want to learn a new skill. How do you get from the state of wanting to actually achieving the thing? Behavior change is a deep and complicated subject that I'm definitely not an expert on. So for the sake of the video, I'm just going to be mentioning two things that have been really useful for me and are kind of in line with this whole note-taking thing. If one of your goals is to start a side hustle, but your daily routine looks like you waking up, going to work, coming home, eating dinner, watching Netflix for the rest of the evening, and going to sleep and repeating it the next day, I'm sorry to say it, but it's not going to happen for you. If you want to actually achieve your goals, you have to make time for them somewhere in your day-to-day life. When I started my sticker shop, I did it with only about an hour a day in the evenings after work. It was the small amount of time I had after dinner and putting the kids to bed. Take a look at your calendar and see when you can realistically set time aside for your goals. Don't fall into the trap of being too aspirational. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of time, but it can't be zero time. Even the smallest steps forward will eventually get you there, but doing nothing won't. Add it to your calendar like you would any other appointment, and respect yourself enough to keep it. Something that people struggle with when they have a big goal that takes a long time to accomplish is feeling a sense of progress every day. Breaking up these large projects into small chunks that are doable in the time that you set aside for yourself can help you feel that progress without getting overwhelmed. For example, in one of my other videos, I go through how to start a digital product store in 4 steps. The first step is coming up with an idea, which might still be too big or overwhelming. So you could break that step down further into brainstorming skills you currently have or would like to acquire, browse Etsy and other marketplaces to find products that you can make with your current skills, research startup costs for different product ideas, and so on. Like with previous steps of this process, you might find yourself benefiting from an analog way of doing this. For me, again, I like to take a mixed approach. On most days, I use an app called Things to keep track of my to-dos. It syncs between all of my devices and has a great interface. But sometimes I find having a physical paper list helps a lot. For that, I put a sticky note on the back of my Commonplace book, and I physically write down everything I want to get done that day. If I do a task, I get to cross it off, and it might sound silly, but it's a surprisingly satisfying thing to do. If I don't do a task, I have to write it down again on tomorrow's list. The act of rewriting the same uncompleted task over and over day after day forces you to reflect on whether a task is actually important to you or not. Most likely, if you've gone through this whole process, you've pinpointed something that you've actually wanted to do. And if you find yourself not making any progress towards it, day after day for a long time, you can only fool yourself for so long. If you're interested in the specific sticky notes that I use, it's also from Midori. It has the same high quality paper as their journals. The dimensions fit perfectly on the field notes notebooks, but the downside is that they're not very sticky. To get around that, I use this sticky tape called the Kokuyu dot liner. The yellow one I have here has a temporary adhesive that works great for increasing stickiness. I'll link this down along with everything else in this video in the description below. But that's it for the video. Let me know your thoughts. Do you currently keep a notebook, or have you in the past? Did you find it helpful or not really? If you like this video, you might also enjoy my newsletter. It's a short email from me with the top productivity and business insights that I learn every week. I'll leave a link down below where you can sign up if you're interested. If not, thanks so much for watching. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.